is the Chief Executive Officer of Startup Nation Central. Professor Kandel is also a Professor of Economics at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. His schedule is very tight, so I will not give you his whole CV. He did a lot of interesting things in Israel and in the US. So thanks a lot for coming, and Eugene, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. It's a privilege to be here, and I wanted to talk a little bit with you about some of the things that happened in Israel over the last, I would say, 25 years, sort of escalating into the development of the full-blown innovation ecosystem. I would like to say a few words about why perhaps it happened, and to discuss what kind of things we can do together. And I think that this university could be a big player in this if it happens, if the innovation sort of economy takes root and expands. And in Cyprus, this university should definitely play a big role in that. So just a couple of words about the organization that I lead. It's a non-profit that is dedicated to promoting innovation in Israel and helping it expand, connecting it to the world, and creating the hospitable and how would I say this, conducive environment in which it can prosper and expand in Israel and connect it to the world. So that's what we do. We don't charge for anything we do because we're lucky to have donors that are helping us. And we're a fairly large organization. We're about 50 people. So so we do a lot of different things. I don't have time, but you can go to that website. It's a platform that we established and maintain. It's basically your gateway and GPS into the Israeli innovation ecosystem. Basically anything that is part of that ecosystem, you can go. It's just type Startup Nation Finder in Google or any other browser that you may be using, and you'll get on it. We have several websites. We have blog website. We have our sort of organizational website, and this is fine. So. Basically, this is Israel, and despite its small size, we are number 6 in the Startup Genome ranking of cities. Just to give you a perspective, 5 years ago we were number 2 after Silicon Valley. But this is in absolute terms. And even in absolute terms, Tel Aviv is a powerhouse in this. Just to give you perspective, Tel Aviv is a 400,000 people city. Okay, so even if in the environment, in the surrounding areas, it's about 1 million people. So you can't compare it to Beijing with 25 million people. So you have to somehow scale. And if we scale, we have about one startup, one tech innovative company per 1,600 people. And that number keeps going down because people are created less rapidly than the startups. We enter about 100 new startups every month. We're pretty good in terms of overall innovation index. So we just moved actually yesterday. The web published, so I didn't have time to update the slide because it was published yesterday. So we moved from number 2 to number 3, and US overcame us because part of this ranking is the market size, where it's hard to compete when somebody's 40 times bigger than you. I know you share the feeling, so we definitely, but that's still a good place. We are very high in terms of R&D expenditure. We compete with Korea for the first place, but you can see that both of us are quite apart from everyone else in terms of the R&D. This, by the way, includes government-sponsored R&D, which in Korea is much bigger than in Israel, and the corporate R&D. And the corporate R&D, majority of corporate R&D is done by these multinationals. We have about 230 multinationals with 300 plus R&D centers in Israel. Actually, majority of countries try to attract these multinationals with R&D centers. We actually stopped trying to attract them. We actually think this has been a little bit too much because they basically hoard all our engineers and scientists and all the other stuff is done elsewhere. So there's the multiplier, the employment multiplier per scientist is very low in these companies. And so on the one hand, it's very good that you have all these companies within 100-mile radius or 60-mile radius where a lot of people can work and make very high salaries. At the same time, that creates a disconnect with the rest of the economy. So that's somewhat a problem. But it is what it is, and many of them basically buy Israeli companies and establish an R&D center in Israel through that. Israeli innovation is very much technology driven. It comes from two sources. It comes from both technology sources, one from the universities and one from the Israeli Defense Forces, from the military, because military is a major developer of technologies as well as is a major force in training people, much more than in any other country. And since they train these people, and most of these people leave after 3-4 years, they actually a big supply of extremely highly trained people to this ecosystem. And so since this comes from the technology, then these technologies basically get applied to a variety of fields. For example, people who've been doing ICT or communications or AI, then applying this to agtech. There's a new agricultural technology field, which is not like traditional field in Israel. There's plant sciences, dairy farms, greenhouses, but rather smart farming, which is huge number of sensors and drones and a huge amount of data and artificial intelligence that analyzes this data and basically tells the farmer what to do in different pieces of their life. So this is, and then they go to fintech, and then they go to digital health, but it's also the same base. If you look at the funding, Israel has, should probably kill this thing somehow. Okay. If you look at the funding, there's another thing. Okay. If scaled by the number of people in the country, Israeli ecosystem gets more than 2.5 times more per person than US, which is the second, and much more than European countries. It gets, if you scale by the GDP, the difference is even bigger, because the US has probably 40% higher GDP per capita than we do, so it's going to be even worse. In some areas, like cyber or agritech, in cyber last year, Israel received 15% of the world VC capital for cyber, and 5% of the world output in cyber came out of Israel. So in some areas, we really punch way above our weight. In some areas, it's a little. In agritech, for example, it's between 7 and 10%. So this is very significant. So the question is, how come? Was it some kind of grand design, or was it just lucky break? It was a collaboration of luck, needs, and some design. And so if we look at innovation, innovation comes in two types. One type is innovation when you take your existing resources, including your existing knowledge, existing connection, and existing know-how about the world, and you basically do more with less, a little bit better, a little bit improvements. They could be significant improvements, but they basically gradual. The type 2 innovation, however, is how do you function in a completely different environment. So suppose that you're being dropped in an island where you've never been before. You don't know the flora, you don't know the fauna, you don't know which things will kill you, how do you survive? So unfortunately, the rapid change that we are experiencing makes this second type of innovation, I don't know whether unfortunately, it's a very painful process. So in this painful process, you need two skills. You need the skill to identify change, and you need the skill how do you adapt. Identifying change is very important because nobody drops you really on a deserted island. You just, a new generation, so every one of you has a little device in your pocket which is called smartphone, which completely changed our environment 10 years ago. I mean, I would bet you that none of us would have predicted 1/10 of the things that we now doing and living our lives around that device. It's sort of, now there's a new research that says that it starts affecting us physiologically. Okay, mentally, physiologically, it's something that is completely different environment. And how do you, nobody knocked on the door and said, this thing just going to change your life when it was introduced. It was introduced, it was nice, you know, with pictures, you move things around, very nice. But it did not create a feeling that it was a dramatic change. So how do you get adapted to dramatic change is another skill that you have to possess. And the only way you can get adapted to dramatic change is to trial and error, because you have no prior knowledge about how to function in that environment. And the question is, how do you actually do that? And Israel is actually a good example. Because think about Israel over the last 120 years. Okay, so Jews were living in the land of Israel for whatever, 3,500, 4,000 years. Then they sort of dispersed. There was a small contingent that lived throughout, in Tzfat, in Jerusalem, and in a couple of other places, but they were basically expelled several times. And then there was this idea when we could all come back to the same place, and it started in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and there were massive immigration waves into the land of Israel. There was no country yet. So think about you coming to a country which you have no idea how to function. You're being thrown into something that you don't know the climate, you don't know the language, you don't know the diseases, you don't know anything. And basically, very, very unhospitable environment. And you have to improvise. Because you can't take your agriculture or your city or little town mentality and apply it to this lack of arable land and lack of water and lack of defense, no energy sources, etc. But you have to figure it out. And so what we've done is that we've been trained for the last 2,000 years by being thrown around from country to country and expelled from various places to get adapted very quickly. Because those who didn't adapt were not with us today. The others they stopped being Jews because they stopped being, or they stopped being Jews because they decided that it's easier to be something else and then stop being thrown around. So we are a very, very small proportion of the population that could have been, probably several hundred million people. We are what? We are 16 million? They're all around the world. And so the culture that we had allowed us to start applying this trial and error very, very quickly and build from mistakes and create something, innovative solutions. And then we adopted these innovative solutions and we became pretty good in solving the problems that we had to solve. We had no choice. Basically, the needs were the ones that drove us. Because otherwise I wouldn't be standing here because Israel most likely would not exist today. And so then, after these three circles, the fourth circle was a natural extension. We basically said, wait a minute, we've been pretty good in solving our own problems. We've developed all kinds of innovative solutions. But now the world is coming to the same problem. We faced water problem 100 years ago. We faced no arable land, no energy 100 years ago. Like the UN has its Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Okay, we had our own SDGs. They were just survival development goals. We couldn't have survived without them. So we now basically exporting the know-how and creating an environment where we're trying to make Israel a beta site for testing technologies and selling them, because technology and ideas is the only thing in which your size doesn't matter. Okay, that is a crucial element. You cannot export. You cannot be a big manufacturer. We cannot be a big manufacturer. You cannot be a big manufacturer, you cannot be a big market, you cannot be a big producer of agriculture. But you can be a producer of ideas, and ideas, it doesn't matter. But ideas apply to a small market, small ideas. Ideas apply to a big market, big ideas. Okay, good ideas, in both cases. So that's basically the case. That's how we see. We see Israel. And so the components of the success were a few: A, needs; B, culture. And I'll talk about maybe I'll talk a little bit about the culture. The culture in Israel, it comes as a package deal. And Israelis, some of the Israelis that you may meet, you may find them too direct, too brash, too overconfident, too familiar maybe. This is all part of the package. And they are very direct, and they will tell you what they think about you, sort of WYSIWYG type of thing. Not all Israelis, but the Israelis in that type. They don't waste time. They're very practical. They don't waste time. They will tell the CEO of a huge company that they work for what they think about them and what they think about their program, and they will tell them that you're wrong and you are completely mistaken. And after the CEO has stopped being mad at them, they admit that this is one of the very, very few places in the world where they can really tell them what they think. And you say, even if they're wrong 60% of the time, I cannot get any of that anywhere else. So all of them successful in starting new ideas, because the attitude is basically, if anybody can do it, I can do it better. That's the attitude. I don't wish for something, I just I know. And so things that people attempt are just unbelievable. Not all the people, of course, this is still minority, we're talking about 10% of the population. But what this 10% of the population, like I said, the size doesn't matter when you create incredible ideas. So that's very, very, very important. But in addition to that, we also had the military, which is extremely important in this process, because again, the military generates the need all the time. And this is a real need, and this generates real solutions. And usually the military, in a variety of areas that it's interested in, it's about 5 years ahead of the market. Okay, and since it's ahead of the market, people that are coming out with these technologies, they're ahead of the market, and when they apply these technologies, basic technologies to various applications, they get ahead. Immigration is an incredibly important part, because it mixes people, mixes ideas, mixes different types of views, mixes education forms, and creates a lot of interesting solutions. The government was important in the process by what it did, but it was no less important by what it didn't do. It didn't try to plan this, it didn't try to regulate this, it didn't try to, but basically gave basic support. It created good universities. The military, of course, is financed by the government, but it's not doing it to encourage the ecosystem. The government actually jump-started the VC industry. It invested $80 million in 1993, got them back with interest within 4 years, and jump-started the industry. Again, this was not the grand design. They had many different programs. Most of them failed. This one, but they kept trying. This one clicked and created VC industry. And then they basically said, well, we're going to finance some of the high-risk projects, but nothing else. And we're just going to step out. Now they're moving back into the human capital, whether there's shortage of people, but it's all infrastructure, it's all around, but not sort of telling people what to do, what not to do, etc. And there's been a lot of luck, of various varieties of luck, which I'm not going to go into. So I'm going to talk a little bit. What time is it? Okay, so I'm going to give you two examples of two types of innovation that exists in Israel today, and it comes from two sources. Okay, one I was already talking about, so it came from the need, and so agriculture is a good idea, a good way to illustrate that. And the other type is actually much more modern. It doesn't come from the need, it comes from the expertise. Okay, so these are two different types. So if you look at this table, the first, the third, the fourth, and the fifth are all coming from the needs. Okay, you have to feed the population. Population is rapidly growing. Okay, by 1948 there were 600,000 Jews in the land of Israel. Today we're 9 million. Okay, so you have to feed the population. You have very little arable land. You have very little water. So you have to become very, very efficient. So in 1920, they established, together with the Technion, in 1920s they established Technion, in 1925 Hebrew University, and in 1920 they also established this agricultural research organization, which is called Volcani Institute, because the first founder his name was Volcani. And they started experimenting and doing all these kinds of stuff. So this is 28 years before the country is established. Okay, so this is very, very, this comes from realization we cannot survive here unless we figure out a different way than from our neighbors to live here. Because we're just not gonna be able to survive. And so we did drip irrigation and water management for agriculture, reclamation of water. We reclaim 84% of our wastewater. The next country after us is 25%, Spain. Okay, this is huge. This basically all goes to agriculture. So we basically almost do not use fresh water in agriculture. So every time I always say my audiences, I can afford to take longer showers and feel good about it myself, because I know that my shower is going to go again to the agriculture, so it's going to be reused. Whereas just for comparison, in the United States, 1.5% of wastewater is reclaimed. Okay, for good reasons. But at the same time, you have drought, and in California, which has tons of water, it's just because the water rights are organized really, really in a silly way, you have droughts at the same time where you have plenty of water. So there's dairy farms. How do you supply your population with milk? Okay, you have growing population, lots of babies. We're one of the fastest reproduction rates in the developed world. I mean, you don't have pastures. It's a desert, basically, or semi-desert, semi-arid area. And it's hot. And cows, as we know, don't give milk in a hot climate. That was the tradition over, whatever, thousands of years. That's been known. So how come since the early 70s, Israeli cows give the highest yield of milk in the world? And how come now the dairy farming moved from Wisconsin and Minnesota to Texas? Because we had to figure out how to do that. We didn't design it, we just had to have milk. And so they basically said, well, if we don't have pastures, we have to put the cows, cover them from the sun, cool them with some water mist, and give them food because, and so then if you give them food, you have to optimize on the food. Okay, so we trial and error, and we figured out today every Israeli cow has a chip in her ear. And it also has a whole bunch of monitors, so you measure the temperature, you measure how much it moves around and how much and you basically give that specific cow specific diet. Each cow gets its own diet. Why? Because there's a computer system that generates, based on the vital signs, what that cow needs in a particular, and there's a huge amount of research that goes into feed. And so just to give you an example, when we took Chinese cows that were producing 2,000 liters of milk a year and put them in these sheds and gave them this regimen, they started producing 8,000 liters, 4 times higher, the same cows. In Israel, they produce 12,000. Okay, so this is not grand design. This is just figuring out. So that's based on need. Similarly, greenhouses, you don't have space. You don't have, enough arable land, so you stack stuff up. You start growing strawberries on trees, artificial trees, of course, and you basically automate the production of a variety of things that you otherwise cannot produce, or they're too labor intensive or too expensive to produce. So these are all, so first, third, fourth, and fifth are all the needs. The second one is not the need. We don't need drones. We don't need precision agriculture. We don't have enough space for that. So why did we become almost 10% of the precision agriculture investment in the world? Because we have a lot of components from other places. We have from the military, we have sensors. We have to have good sensors for a variety of reasons. We have to have good communications. We have to get good big data processing. We have to have drones. Israel was the pioneer of using drones. First drones that were deployed in the military were Israeli. And so we basically, they said, okay, we have all this technology, let's shift it to where it has applications and demand. So that is a completely different type of innovation, right? The source of innovation is of different type, and so but it's nevertheless a very rapid one and very rapidly increasing in its popularity. So agriculture gives a very good example. So this is just an example of the second type. Just a quick couple of companies. The second specifically, the first company does optimization, sensors, plant level sensors, in various places, connectivity, communication between sensors, analytics, and then optimization of usage of water and fertilizer, etc. There's a bunch of these companies. This one is specifically been successful, but Tencent, for example, the Chinese company, just invested in them. And Syngenta as well. The second company, we actually know them very well. This guy used to be working for the defense establishment for 9 years, the founder of this company, and then he founded, so he had nothing to do with agriculture. On the other hand, his family comes from a moshav, which is like agricultural, organization, like settlement, and so he decided to bring his knowledge back to the roots. So this company actually created you can understand where it came from. They created a software that allows a drone or an airplane that goes very fast over a field, 30 meters above the field, to get 400 times the resolution of today's best technology. 400 times. Okay? So you basically see the leaf this size on your screen. Okay? So the minute you see the leaf this size, you can apply artificial intelligence and detect when the disease starts from a single leaf. Okay? This is today, the standard technology allows you to see basically the leaf being this size. So the AI cannot read it. Okay? Now again, this is not a need, because in Israel you don't have these huge spaces, but still it's applicable. So we've connected them to Russians and to Brazilians and to American farmers, and they're doing large-scale operations. What's the innovation? The innovation that came from completely different things is how you don't get smudged picture. Because it's very, very difficult to get a clear picture at high speed from the low altitude. That's basically it. But you can understand that it was not developed for agricultural purposes. This was an import. Similarly, so the advantage in Israel of agritech is we have our track record of growing more with less. That's the need-based agriculture. There's a very entrepreneurial farmers, and the reason that the farmers are entrepreneurial is that we've been pioneering all kinds of crops, and each time there was a country somewhere that would copy us and do it cheaper and then basically drive us out of the market. So they had to be constantly reinventing itself. We pioneered, Israel was known in the 60s and early 70s for its oranges. It was exporting tons of oranges to Europe. Israel doesn't export oranges anymore at all. Spain exports oranges. Israel used to export flowers. We don't export flowers. Mexico and Kenya export flowers. Again, some Israelis, by the way, setting shop in those countries and exporting it big. And they much cheaper labor, so that's it. And the same again and again and again. So we had to be, the farmers had to be very entrepreneurial because they had to reinvent themselves every few years. The technology, of course, was very instrumental in this, and there was a big support by the government. There's this agricultural research organization is a 1,000 people organization, which is way too big for a country the size of Israel, with 300 PhDs. They shrunk a little bit, but they're still very formidable, and there's also agricultural research in universities. And a very interdisciplinary approach, which I was talking about. So there's an import from different areas into agriculture. So we see an emergence of a vibrant ecosystem. We are going to issue a report, so please go on our website in a couple of weeks if you're interested in this. We're going to have a report on Israeli agrotech and how it fits into the bigger picture. I'm going to just briefly tell you about Israeli water. Israel, in 1928, British government issued a report which said that the water basin west of Jordan River, including the Jordan River, can support no more than 2 million people. Basically, all the water in that region cannot support more than 2 million people, and otherwise you won't have. This is 1928. People didn't have washing machines. People didn't have. And it basically was drinking and washing once in a while. Very, very small agriculture. Since then, two things happened. One, precipitation declined by 50%. Okay, so that implies that you would probably support fewer people. And we now support 14 million people. No, sorry, 12.5 million people directly, plus we export water to Jordan, both under our peace agreement as well as selling it to them because they don't have enough. And we also export enormous amounts of water through our agriculture to Europe and other places. How come? Okay. Now, one number that you can see is in the center, in the graph in the center, the total amount of water has been increasing that we consume. But the water per capita, look at the difference between 1960 and today in terms of the water per capita. There's a decline of 60%, and that's in the country which became rich country. We are number 25 in terms of GDP per capita with all that it implies. People want, swimming pools and, the lawns and, the gardens, etc. So how come? So this is a combination of a variety of things, and if you look at the sweet water, this is the gray area, this is the sweet water. So we've been going up, and then it's going to be actually, in absolute terms, go down. Okay, and the rest is going to be filled with desalination and reclaimed water, reclaimed brackish water and reclaimed wastewater. Okay, so the total amount of water is projected to increase, but the amount of water that we take from the nature, is it just basically pours on you, is going to, in absolute terms, decline. Imagine what it's going to do on a per capita. Okay, this is not something that somebody sat in the office and said, we have the vision, even though Ben-Gurion had a big vision about water, etc., and the efforts were in place for desalination, etc. These things cannot happen without the government. But it's much more trial and error necessity that you had to figure it out, because otherwise you couldn't have lived there. I mean, today Israeli population is 9 million people. We're going to cross 10 million probably in a few years, not probably, hopefully. And it's not something that you, and there's no single silver bullet. This is a combination of the need and the realization of the need. Okay, you have to be very, very clear that your population understands that there's a need. Okay, you have to educate this population. Okay, so there's the face of this woman. It's a commercial about 10 years ago where all kinds of celebrities were showing up, their faces were showing up on the television, and they had makeup that started cracking. It's got a new face, and they were saying, we're drying up, and their face was cracking. It was very, very powerful. The decline in the consumption of water, 20%. Just this campaign. Okay, again, this was trial and error. Nobody knew that it would be so effective, but it's continuous education. You continue to educate people, children in the kindergarten, that even when they go to the bathroom, there are two things. If you did something small, you have to press this button, and if you need more water, then you press another button. So even that level of education. The policies, of course, are very important in this space. And the first of the most important policies, which is the biggest difference between Israel and California, is actually the water in Israel is a national resource. There's one authority that coordinates it. The industry structure on the left there is different. There's centralized planning, but the execution is done by a variety of local organizations which are given incentives to actually invest and to prevent water leakages, etc., etc. Now, not happened overnight. A lot of things change all the time. There's a continuous change, but you're constantly trying to improve. And of course, technology and pricing are extremely important in that. So this is the need, and how you address it is very, very important. I'm going to skip this for lack of time and go to lessons. If I were to be to be asked about what Cyprus can learn from Israel, what can Cyprus do with Israel, I want to point out a couple of thoughts. First of all, many countries want to create their own innovation ecosystem. It's difficult. There's no cut and paste solutions, because otherwise there will be hundreds of those already in existence. The fact that there are very, very few, and literally in terms of the scale and the self-sustainability, there are some places like Beijing, which is all fueled by government money. If you remove the government money, it'll collapse. Okay, so I'm not saying it's good or bad. See, for example, Singapore has been supporting that for a very long period of time. They have great financial industry, they have other industries, absolutely marvelous job, not very functioning innovation ecosystem. It's hard. So cut and paste doesn't work. Each one has to do based on their strength and respective advantages. In order to create innovation ecosystem, you have to change the mindset. Okay, people that are trained to be good corporate citizens are not good innovators. That's just not the same set of skills. So a person who has run through a corporate ringer of Japanese education system, and then training, etc., and became sort of a corporate citizen of Japan, is not a good innovator. Not because Japanese cannot be innovators, but then it's just a different set of skills. And it takes time, and unfortunately it's hard to teach. It's, if people are taught, the culture a certain way, you can't just say to them, oh, okay, we'll go and take risks. Well, but you have to have sort of surrounding support of the risk-taking. And if your career is ruined the first time you fail, that's basically a good way to preclude anybody from taking risks. So that takes time, and it requires interaction with people that are inherently in that mode of behavior. And we see a lot of people being sort of infected with this bug. And so the important questions are: what's your source of strength? What are the areas where you would be productive to focus on? Should you do it alone or collaborating? If you're collaborating, who's your strategic partners? And so what I want to postulate is interesting. I don't know whether it's interesting, but it's an idea that perhaps combining efforts between Israel and Cyprus could be a useful useful endeavor. And here's what I mean. Neighbors are important, and both you and us, don't have that many sort of productive neighbors. The advantage of Israel is that it has a very vibrant, globally recognized ecosystem and innovation, but it experiences severe shortages in human capital, and it experiences difficulties in regulatory, in understanding the problems that many countries face within their regulatory frameworks. Because in Israel, the regulatory framework is very different than in the US or in Europe. Cyprus has a good education system. It's part of EU that allows it to be the gateway to EU. It has a very supportive tax and immigration regime relative to Israel. And so if you combine them into two, Israel can serve for Cyprus as the seed for the emergence of the ecosystem, which in Israel the seed was the military and then the multinationals. You don't have the military in that capacity. The military in Cyprus doesn't serve that capacity, and the multinationals here are not doing the R&D part. And so Israel can serve that capacity. On the other hand, Cyprus can serve as a supplier of skilled workers, both Cypriots, expats, as well as foreign workers, and then as well as the gateway to EU. So it can generate, there's a bunch of examples, I'm not going to go through all of them, but just for the first one, generating regulatory sandboxes for fintech vis-a-vis European Union. And this is a great opportunity because Brexit just threw in the air the entire fintech regulatory structure that's been built by the Brits around their financial ecosystem and around their financial regulation in the EU. Now, they're no longer going to be part of the EU. Their regulatory framework will be different. So now the fintech that is connected to that will migrate. Question, the regulatory body will migrate to Frankfurt. The question is, where would the fintech migrate? And so there's a great opportunity for both Israel, Cyprus and Israel, so that fintech part will migrate here. There are over 400 fintech companies in Israel. Okay, many of them are doing stuff with a lot of foreign companies, of course, because all the market is outside. This could be done here. So that's just an example. Digital health is another. So there are many different things that can be done, and I think that this organization, University of Cyprus, could be a great facilitator of this innovation effort, and I hope that we can do beautiful things together. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Professor, for this very insightful talk. I don't know if we have a question. We don't have time for questions because Professor Kendall has to leave to go to the presidential palace. But thanks a lot. The talk was very interesting, and I'm sure tomorrow in Limassol, in the Climate Kick, will be more time for discussions.
Thank you.
So thanks again for coming to the University of Cyprus.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your comments.